So in this video I'm going to show you how to make a 4-round granny square. I'm going to show you how to make the standalone 4-round square. There are further instructions for how to join in the final round. So this motif I've used double knit cotton from Paint Box Yarns and a 3.5mm hook, but you can use any corresponding hook size and appropriate yarn. So I've used the same colours for rounds 1 and 2 just because it helps save sewing in a few ends, and then another 2 colours for rounds 3 and 4. You could use a different colour for each round, or you could make the whole thing in one colour. It's entirely up to you, and this pattern is easily adaptable because of the way each round starts. So let's start with a slip knot loop on the hook, and then we're going to chain 4 and join in the first chain to form a ring. So we treat that first chain like a normal stitch. We've got 2 loops and then the back ridge at the back, and then you're going to join with a slip stitch. So you can do that however you like. I tend to pull the whole chain to the back and also hold down the tail end and then pull the live yarn through this chain and the loop on the hook. Then we're going to chain 4 and place 3 double crochets into the ring. Chain 2, and this is a corner, and another 3 double crochet. Another chain 2 for another corner, and another 3 double crochet. You might notice here that I am crocheting round the tail end. You can do this as well, it helps save a bit of time sewing in at the end, but you don't have to do it if it's too much to think about. So I need to do another chain 2 for my 4th corner, and then this initial chain that we did, this is actually counting as a double crochet and the space and the first corner. So now I just need to put in 2 double crochets into the ring, and then I'm going to join with a slip stitch into the 3rd chain of this beginning chain 4. So I'm counting up from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 3rd chain. Again, remember to treat this chain as if it was a normal stitch. So front loop, back loop, and then you've got the back ridge at the back. Avoid going just round the chain because it distorts it, because that slip stitch can just slide around anywhere. Also avoid just pulling up one of the loops because that also causes distortion. So just imagine it's a normal stitch. So we've slip stitched into there, and what you should have at the end of round 1 is 4 lots of 3 double crochet clusters and 4 chain 2 corners. So one thing I'll say is that if your final corner is a bit too small, you may want to change your starting chain to a chain 5. I find that if I do a chain 5, my starting, this first corner is much too big compared to the rest. However, if you think yours is too small, do switch to a chain 5 at the start of every round. Now let's do round 2. If you're continuing with this colour, you will be slip stitching into that chain 2 space. If you want a new colour, before you do that slip stitch at the end of the instructions for the round we've just done, you'll just cut the yarn and pull the live loop through. I want to carry on with this colour, so as I said, I'm going to slip stitch into that first corner space, and then I'm going to do a chain 4, or a chain 5 if you found your hole was too small. Now I'm going to put 3 double crochets into this same space. Next I'm going to make a corner in this corner. So a corner for a granny square, for this granny square, is 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets, 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. So that's what your corner should look like. So for every round of this motif, the corners are all the same. So even if you add extra rounds on, the corners are always 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. So round 2 is a bit of an anomaly because round 1 is a bit of an anomaly as well, but round 2 is a bit of an anomaly because every you're just making corners and nothing else really. Okay, so I've made 1 partial corner and 3 full corners, and now I'm ready to finish off this first corner that I started right at the beginning. So in the same space I'm going to put 2 double crochets, remembering that this first chain is counting as one of my stitches for the last cluster. So I'm going to find the third chain, 1, 2, 3, treat it like a normal stitch, I'm going to slip stitch into it. And I am actually going to change colour now, so I'm going to cut the yarn, leaving a tail end, and then I'm going to pull that live loop through and fasten off. So at the end of round 2 you should have 4 corners, and each corner is consisting of 3 double crochet and a chain 2 space. I'm now going to do round 3 using a different colour. I'm going to make sure I join in a different corner each time. If you keep joining the yarn in the same corner, because there is a slight difference, your eye gets drawn to it, so it's better to move along to the next one. So there are 2 ways of, well, there's more than 2 ways, but these are the 2 ways that I suggest to join the yarn. You can use my method, which is just holding a tail end at the back at the point where you want to join and pulling up a loop and then continuing in pattern, and then you'll have to sew that end in afterwards to secure it. Or you can make a slip knot loop on your hook and then slip stitch into that corner, and what happens is that knot spins itself round to the back, and then you can continue in pattern. So the only thing I don't like about that is that it does leave this little horizontal ridge at the front and also a knot at the back, which might be right for blankets and things, but for a garment I don't think we really want knots. But again, it's entirely up to you. The way you crochet, it might not actually cause an issue. For some reason when I do it, it always looks quite messy, which is why I'm not a big fan of it. So I will go back to my preferred method, which is just holding the tail end at the back, pulling up a loop, and then proceeding in pattern, which is chain 4, 3 double crochet in the ring, and I always catch in my little tail end there so that when I come to sew I've got one less step to do because I've already caught it in one direction. Now with a traditional granny, you are always crocheting between stitches and not in stitches, so between the 2 double clusters from the previous round we're going to put 3 double crochets. And now we're making another corner, which which if you remember from round 2 is 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. Three double crochet between the next set of clusters from the previous round. Should look like this. And make another corner. Three double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, onto the next side, 3 double crochet between next set of clusters, next corner. I'm just going to sort of fold that tail end over so that I crochet round it, and again on this step for sewing that end in when we finished. In the corner, 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. Not happy with that. Last side, 3 double crochet between the clusters from the previous round. And now I'm ready to finish off this first corner. So I just need to put in 2 double crochets in that first corner. I'm using that starting chain as a stitch. I'm going to slip stitch into the third chain of my beginning chain, 4 or 5 depending on which one you're using. 1, 2, 3, slip stitch, cut the yarn, pull the tail end through to fasten off. And this is what it should look like at the end of row 3. So on each side you should have 1, 2, 3 sets of 3 double crochets and a chain 2 space in each corner. Now I'm going to do round 4, and I'm using another colour again, and I'm going to start in the next corner from the one I just finished, and again start however you like. I'm just going to hold the tail end at the back, and then I'm going to chain 4 in the same space, 3 double crochet, and I'm catching in my tail. This time, because each round we're increasing, we've now got 2 spaces into which we need to put a set of 3 double crochets, a set of 3 double crochet clusters. And that's 1 between the first set and 2 lots of 3 double crochet in total along that edge. Next we come to a corner, which you should know by now is 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. Another side, we've got 2 spaces between the clusters, and we're going to put 3 double crochet between each of those sets of clusters from the previous round. And that's the good thing about this traditional granny square, it's very intuitive because every round is the same. You might have more spaces to crochet into, but once you've got past rounds 1 and 2, it's all very obvious what you need to do, as long as you don't lose track of your corners. Finishing off this corner, onto the third side, 3 double crochet between the clusters of the previous rounds, another corner. This time it's the beginning of the previous round, beginning and end. So I'm just going to make sure I'm crocheting over that tail end as I do my 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, and that's tucked in there neatly now. Last side coming up, and we're ready to finish off that first corner by putting 2 double crochets into that exact same spot and slip stitching into the third chain from the of your beginning chain 3, and it would also be a beginning chain 4 rather. So 1, 2, so I've that first bit of the chain is twisted a bit where I've caught the leg in, but I can still read it. 1, 2, 3, front loop of the chain, back loop of the chain, slip stitch, cut the yarn and fasten off. So at the end of this round you should have, at the end of round 4, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of 3 double crochet clusters on each side and a chain 2 space in each corner. So if you wanted to make your motif bigger, it's really straightforward, because all you would do is do the same process again. Move around one corner, join the yarn however you like, chain 4, 3 double crochet, and then place 3 double crochets between each of these clusters. So once you know how to do up to this round, it's pretty straightforward to just carry on adding as many rounds as you want. And remember, if you decide that actually you want to do 2 rounds in this colour, you just carry on round. When you get back to this chain start, you slip stitch into the third chain, and then you slip stitch back into the space, and then start in the pattern again, because you're just kind of resetting yourself into the middle of that corner space. Another thing I would recommend is sewing in your ends as you go along. So you have a few different scenarios here. You've got the one at the start. What I like to do is just carry on round the ring a bit with the needle, and then thread the needle. If you've got a long enough tail, you can thread the needle first, but I always work with short tails because it saves yarn. Be very careful not to cut your work. If you haven't caught your tail ends in, you will need to work them twice. By that I mean catch one of the legs. So I've actually split that first leg in half, and then thread the yarn one way. If you've already caught it in as you've crocheted, you can now cut that off, because the trick to sewing in ends for them not to come undone is to go one way, catch one of the legs or another stitch at the back, and go back the other way. So we're always working in the back here. Sometimes some of the tail ends could pop round to the front. So for example, I might find that this one is round the front here, so before you start weaving in the ends you need to pop them all round to the back. If you didn't catch your tail end in as you crocheted, you'll need to go one way and then back the other. So again, you can either catch one of these stitches here, or split the leg, or skip a leg. It's up to you, as long as you're making sure you're not literally just undoing the stitch you've just made. So remember, one way and back the other, or if you've caught it in with your crochet, you just need to go back the other way. So these ones that are in the middle of the round are always pretty easy to do because you're going back into the cluster, and that's the best place to hide your ends because it's a nice dense area of stitches, and the end is less likely to pop out. Another place you might need to sew in an end is at the very end of the round. I tend not to sew these in until the very last round. I tend to not sew in until the project is finished because, you know, you might have a border where you could hide this in. But if you haven't, the best thing to do with this one is to actually go weave it back down the chain that you made. So if I turn the work to the back, you can see here's the back of the chain, and so I'm going to do kind of running stitch down the back of this chain. So I'm being careful to only catch the back of this chain so as not to be too visible at the front. The chain tends to be a bit skinnier than the normal stitches, so this is actually also quite a good way to plump up that chain to make it match the crochet better. So you can do this all in one go or 2 steps if you like. So you can run it down the chain, pull it out, or run it down the chain and then divert off to the left of this cluster slightly. That's what I tend to do to try and save time. So this particular end that you're sewing in is already pretty secure because it's a slip stitch join and then you fastened it off. However, I still would recommend tucking it back into that cluster area just to stop it popping out. And remember to try and keep gauge. So if you pull that too tight, it will pull your chain down and make make your work look wonky. That stitch will be too short. So I'm also now going and sewing in this other end. And do these 2 quickly. These have all been caught in as I crochet, so I only need to go one way. So when I'm doing it, I can tell if I've sewn an end in or not. It depends if the end's coming out of the left hand side of the cluster, I know I've already sewn it in, because that's the other thing you can do. If you're not systematic, you can start sewing in ends and save the cutting till last, the trimming till last, and then sometimes you're not sure whether you've sewn an end in or not. So that's how I tell by the fact that every end I've sewn in, apart from the ones running down the chain, are always popping out on the left hand side once I've sewn them in. It's quite handy when you're doing a really big project and it's quite easy to lose track. I do try to be systematic, so for example I'll either start from the middle and do all the tail ends in order of the rows, or I could work from the outside and do, you know, that colour first, then that colour, then that row, and then that row. Whatever works best for you, really. Let's trim all these ends and have a little look at our motif. So there we are. Here is your traditional 4 round granny square.